In order to prove that sows have a unique flavor, my uncle actually raised a 10-year-old sow in his bedroom. But every night, strange sounds could be heard from my uncle's room. Not long after the sow gave birth to 11 piglets on her own. However, all of them were deformed, missing limbs, so my uncle said he would bury them in the back mountain. Just as he said that, the sow in our pig pen raised her head and looked at my uncle. Her gaze at my uncle was strange. It was indescribably eerie. Grandma fed the sow 2 eggs, and even rubbed her belly. Grandma smiled and said, "Wangza, what nonsense are you saying? These 11 piglets can sell for a good price." Uncle shouted, "But these are deformed piglets." Grandma replied, "So what? Deformed piglets are still piglets. We can raise them and sell them later." As Grandma said this, she glanced at Grandpa. Grandpa chuckled and said, "Who knows whose seed this is? So many in one litter. According to our village custom, we only keep sows. If a sow needs to get pregnant, we borrow a boar from another household. When the sow gives birth, we have to give 2 piglets to that household. But we don't even know which boar got our sow pregnant. So these 2 piglets were saved." As soon as Grandpa finished, my uncle's face changed. He shouted at Grandpa, "Deformed piglets can't survive. I say we should kill them all." Uncle was the only college student in the village. Normally he was mild-tempered, rarely losing his temper. No one understood why he was so angry today. He was furious, unlike his usual self. Grandpa asked him, "Wangza, what's wrong with you?" Uncle was trembling with anger. He ran into the storage room and grabbed a bamboo basket. Grandma asked him, "Wangza, what are you doing with that basket?" Uncle stormed into the pig pen with the basket. He loaded the piglets into the basket, and shouted, "I'm going to bury these deformed piglets alive." Grandma tried to stop him. "Wangza, put the basket down. Are you out of your mind?" My uncle shouted at Grandma, "Deformed piglets can't be raised. They must be killed." Uncle's tone was harsh. He was acting out of character today. Grandma was about to stop him, but Grandpa signaled her to keep quiet. Grandma stood there in shock for a few seconds. Uncle carried the bamboo basket and walked out of the yard. Grandma said, "Old man, what is Wangza doing?" Grandpa frowned. Looking at Uncle's back, he said, "Wangza must be feeling bitter inside." Although Uncle is the only college student in the village, he was born deformed. He's very short. His left hand is shaped like a goat's hoof. Grandma sighed. She said, 11 piglets. What a pity. They're worth money." Grandpa shook his head helplessly. He turned to me and said, "Chunbao, go follow your uncle. Dig up the piglets." I nodded. Then I ran out of the yard. Uncle carried the bamboo basket to the back mountain. He stopped halfway up the mountain. Uncle dug a hole there. He emptied the piglets from the basket into the hole. He cursed, "Deformed piglets deserve to die." I was standing a bit far away, but I could still see the deformed piglets struggling in the hole. They were moving around, especially when Uncle started covering them with soil. Some piglets even tried to climb out, but Uncle pushed them back down. Soon, Uncle filled up the hole. He even stomped on the soil a few times. After finishing, Uncle carried the bamboo basket down the mountain. He looked very pleased, humming a song as he walked. When Uncle was far away, I quickly started digging. Luckily the hole wasn't very deep. I managed to dig up all 11 piglets, but 2 of them weren't moving. They seemed to have stopped breathing. I shook it in my hand, but there was no response. Could it be dead? Just as I was feeling puzzled, I heard some movement behind me. I turned around, and saw the family sow. It was less than a meter away from me. It was staring at me intensely. The sow's gaze was unsettling. Its mouth revealed sharp tusks. Last time Grandpa fed it, it bit his hand, causing a lot of bleeding. Fearing it might bite me, I placed the piglet on the ground, and cautiously stepped back. Our sow was enormous, weighing at least 500 to 600 pounds. If it bit me, it could crush my skull. As I backed away, the sow approached the piglets, sniffed the piglets on the ground, and nudged the 2 lifeless ones. The sow picked up the dead piglets in its mouth. I heard the crunching sound of chewing. The sow ate the dead piglets. Its mouth was foaming. It made eerie noises as it ate. The sound sent shivers down my spine. I quickly ran down the mountain. Grandpa came looking for the sow. Grandpa asked me, "Chunbao, did you see the sow?" I said yes. It's halfway up the mountain. It ate the dead piglets. Grandpa frowned. He said, "Quick, take me to see." I led Grandpa up the mountain. Grandpa carried a cleaver on his back. They say a sow that has just given birth is more dangerous than a tiger. Grandpa was afraid the sow might go crazy and attack. When we reached halfway up the mountain, I smelled a strong stench of blood. The sow was still eating the piglets. Its mouth was covered in blood. Originally there were 11 piglets. The sow had eaten all but 6 piglets. The remaining 6 seemed to sense danger. They didn't dare get close to the sow. The 6 piglets huddled together. Grandpa was furious, stomping his feet. He cursed, "You beast. You ruined perfectly good piglets." Just as Grandpa finished speaking, the sow glanced sideways at him. Its gaze seemed to warn Grandpa not to come closer. Grandpa took the cleaver from his back. The sow glanced at the cleaver in his hand. Instinctively it lowered its head, emitting eerie guttural noises. Grandpa removed his jacket, spreading it on the ground. He carefully placed the 6 piglets on it, and picked them up. Grandpa said, "Let's go down the mountain." He herded the sow down the mountain. The sow lowered its head and started descending. It moved slowly. The sow knew the mountain well, as Grandpa often let it roam there. As they walked, Grandpa lamented what a waste of 5 piglets. They could have sold for a good price. Just as Grandpa said this, a loud thunderclap echoed. Boom! Lightning struck a clear sky. Immediately after, the sky darkened. A heavy rain started pouring. Grandpa paused for a few seconds, caught off guard. Suddenly the sow went wild, running toward the mountain peak. The peak was an old burial ground, a place full of graves. It was eerie, and people rarely went there. Seeing the sow run off, Grandpa handed the piglets to me. "Chunbao, take these home first." After saying this, Grandpa hurried up the mountain to chase the sow. He ran toward the peak. Carrying the 6 piglets, I went down the mountain. By the time I got home, I was soaked to the skin. Grandma asked me, "Chunbao, where's your grandpa? Why didn't he come back with you?" I said Grandpa went after the sow. He ran toward the mountain peak. As soon as I finished speaking, Grandma's eyes widened. She glanced at the heavy rain outside, and muttered, "This is bad. Rainy days carry heavy resentment. We mustn't let unclean things latch onto us." I placed the 6 piglets on the ground. Grandma asked, "Why did you only bring back 6 piglets?" I said the sow ate the other 5. Grandma frowned deeply. She said, "No, I have to go find your grandpa." After saying this, she threw on a cloak and left the house. I was left alone in the house. I placed the piglets on the heated bed, and covered them with an old quilt. They were soaking wet. I don't know how much time passed. The rain stopped. Grandpa and Grandma returned with the sow. Grandpa looked upset. As soon as he locked the sow in the pen, Uncle came out of the west room. He said he wanted to move the sow into his room. Grandpa said sternly, "No way." Uncle froze for a moment. He asked why not. Grandpa snorted coldly. With a sour tone he said, "The sow went missing, and you didn't even bother looking for it on the mountain. Your mother and I nearly got drenched to death in the rain, and you didn't ask a thing. All you care about is the sow. All those years of studying seem wasted on you. It's like you studied for nothing." Grandma nudged Grandpa's shoulder. She said, "Enough, old man. Wangza didn't know I went up the mountain to find you." Grandpa, still angry, told Uncle, "Tomorrow I'm selling the sow." Just as Grandpa finished speaking, the sow in the pen gave Grandpa a sidelong glance. Its gaze seemed to be sizing him up. When Uncle heard Grandpa talk about selling the sow, Uncle immediately panicked. He shouted, "Why are you selling the sow?" Grandpa replied, "The sow dug up old Chen Chi's grave, and even ate half of his corpse. This sow is cursed. We can't keep it." Old Chen Chi was a villager, tall and strong. He wasn't even 10 years old, and 7 days ago, he tragically drowned in the river. Old Chen Chi was an excellent swimmer, so no one could figure out why he drowned. As Grandpa finished speaking, Uncle's expression changed. He glanced at the sow, then said, "What's so cursed about this? Pigs naturally eat meat." Grandpa responded, "It ate a human body. It remembers the taste of flesh. It craves corpses. This sow can't stay. I'll sell it tomorrow." Uncle, frustrated, stomped his feet. He opened the pen gate, insisting on driving the sow into his room. Grandpa, enraged, slapped Uncle hard across the face. Uncle had never been hit before. Grandpa's slap stunned him. Uncle widened his eyes, and yelled at Grandpa, "You dare hit me?" Grandpa said, "You beast. We've spoiled you rotten. Get back inside." Grandma stepped in, stopping Grandpa. "Enough. Don't scold him anymore." Uncle stared at Grandpa with bloodshot eyes. In a cold voice he said, "If you dare sell the sow, I'll burn the house down." Grandpa coughed in anger, furious. Before Grandpa could respond, Uncle ran to the storage room, grabbing dry branches. He was ready to set the house on fire. Uncle shouted, "Come on, do it. Whoever dares to sell the sow, I'll burn this house down." Grandpa was about to say something, but Grandma stopped him. Grandma said, "We won't sell it. We won't sell it. Wangza, stop making a fuss." Seeing Grandma agree not to sell the sow, Uncle smirked triumphantly. He led the sow back into his room. Not long after, he heard the sow squealing. Grandpa was furious. He said, "Old woman, let's find Wangza a wife." Grandma replied, "Which girl in the nearby villages would want him? Wangza is too short." Grandpa sighed. He said, "Offer more dowry money. Tomorrow I'll ask Aunt Chen. She knows a lot of people." 3 days later, Aunt Chen brought a beautiful girl to our house. The girl's name was Chen Yun. She was tall, and very pretty. As soon as she entered the yard, Uncle's eyes widened. He kept staring at Chen Yun. Chen Yun smiled politely. She said her parents had passed away early, and she lived with her brother and sister-in-law. Her brother and sister-in-law were eager to marry her off. Aunt Chen said with a smile. Xiao Yun. Wangzi is a college student. He's educated. He'll surely stay in the city in the future. You two should chat. Aunt Chen's suggestion was for Uncle to take Chen Yun out for a walk, to talk and get to know each other. Uncle froze for a few seconds before reacting. He slowly stood up and said to Chen Yun, I'll take you out for a walk. Chen Yun was from another village and had never been to ours. She nodded and followed Uncle out of the yard. Uncle had a smile on his face and kept glancing at Chen Yun. Chen Yun was indeed beautiful, but her family was poor. As the two passed by the pig pen, suddenly the pig pen door burst open. Our sow ran out of the pen. It charged at Chen Yun like it had gone mad. It knocked Chen Yun to the ground. The sow opened its mouth, trying to bite Chen Yun's head. Grandpa drove it away with a stick. Grandpa shouted angrily, you beast. Cause trouble again, and I'll kill you. The sow retreated to a corner. It gave Uncle a sidelong glance. Uncle glared at the sow menacingly. As if warning it, Uncle helped Chen Yun up, gently asking, are you okay? Chen Yun shook her head. She said, I'm fine. Chen Yun was gentle by nature, and her tone was soft. Uncle led Chen Yun outside. Grandpa locked the sow back in the pen. Aunt Chen smiled and said, I think there's hope. Grandma smiled and added, Xiao Yun is a good girl. We're satisfied. Aunt Chen held up 5 fingers and pointed at the sow in our yard. She said, Xiao Yun is beautiful. Many suitors want to marry her, but no one can afford the dowry. If your family can pay the dowry, we'll send her over tomorrow. Chen Yun's brother and sister-in-law were eager to marry her off to get the dowry money. Grandpa frowned. He said, Aunt Chen, that's too expensive. Not to mention, the sow alone is worth a lot of money. Aunt Chen pursed her lips. She said, Uncle, to be honest, Wangzi is not young anymore. It's time for him to settle down. We can't delay this any longer. The dowry money is non-negotiable. Grandpa and Grandma exchanged glances. Grandma gritted her teeth. She said, fine, our family agrees to the dowry. The sooner the wedding the better. Grandma said. Aunt Chen immediately beamed. She said, the wedding is easy to arrange. I'll bring her over in a couple of days. That evening, Grandma asked Uncle, do you like this girl? Uncle smiled and said, yes, I like her. Grandma said, I told Aunt Chen that we'll marry her into the family in 2 days. But the girl's family asked for a dowry. We'll have to give them the sow. Uncle froze for a moment, then said if they want it they can have it. Seeing Uncle agree, Grandpa and Grandma both breathed a sigh of relief. Uncle seemed in high spirits, eating heartily. He really liked Chen Yun. Seeing Uncle in such a good mood, Grandma smiled and said, Wangzi, we still have 6 piglets. Once the sow is gone, we can raise the piglets in the pen. The 6 deformed piglets had been kept secret from Uncle, hidden in the east room. Uncle said, if you want to raise them, go ahead. After dinner, Uncle returned to his room. That night, he didn't even glance at the sow. Grandpa and Grandma smiled. Grandma said, the dowry is expensive, but it's worth it. Before long, we'll have grandchildren to hold. Grandpa chuckled. He said, yes indeed. Just as Grandpa finished speaking, there was a loud knocking on the door. Grandpa opened the door and saw the sow standing outside. It was making strange guttural noises. The 6 piglets heard the sow's calls and ran toward it. The sow entered the house and lay down to nurse the piglets. Grandma frowned. She said, old man, the piglets are only a few days old. They still rely on the sow. Grandma said, what should we do? Grandpa frowned. He said, this sow is cursed. We can't keep it. Grandma replied, if we raise these 6 piglets, they'll fetch a good price. Grandpa said, the sow is part of the dowry. We already promised them. Grandma hesitated for a few seconds, then said, we can't just watch the piglets starve to death. How about we keep the sow for now? Once the piglets are older, we'll send the sow over. As soon as Grandma finished speaking, I noticed the sow's eyes move. It seemed like it understood our conversation. Grandpa said, will they agree? Grandma replied, why wouldn't they? We can just give them another piglet to make up for it. 3 days later, Chen Yun was married into our family. We held a banquet. Grandma was so happy she cried. Chen Yun's brother and sister-in-law agreed to let us keep the sow, but requested an extra piglet. Grandpa and Grandma didn't want to argue on such a joyous day, so they agreed. The sow stayed with us for now. After the banquet, Uncle eagerly pulled Chen Yun into his room and locked the doors and windows. Grandpa and Grandma sat on the heated bed counting gifts. Smiling, Grandma said with a smile, old man, did you notice? Wangzi is happy today. Grandpa replied, I did. Wangzi has finally settled down. Grandpa smiled, lit a pipe and began to smoke. But before he could take 2 puffs, we heard piglets screaming in the yard. It was a terrible sound. Grandpa and Grandma froze. They hurriedly got off the bed and ran outside. I followed them, only to see our sow eating the piglets. Its mouth was covered in blood. Grandpa was furious. He hit the sow on the head with a stick and snatched a half-eaten piglet carcass from its mouth. Grandpa shouted, "You beast! Eating your own offspring." Grandma said, "Old man, what are we going to do about this sow eating the piglets?" Grandpa said, "Put a muzzle on it." After saying this, he went to the storage room. He came back with a muzzle and put it on the sow. Grandpa said, "Remove the muzzle only when feeding it." It took Grandpa a lot of effort to secure the muzzle on the sow. Despite all the commotion, Uncle didn't even come out to check. The next morning before dawn, Uncle was in the kitchen, helping Chen Yun prepare breakfast. The two of them were laughing and chatting. Chen Yun brought the dishes to the table, smiling as she said, "Father, Mother, try the food I made." Grandpa and Grandma smiled, praising Chen Yun's cooking. After breakfast, Grandpa and Grandma took Uncle to honor the ancestors. It was a tradition in our village. After clearing the dishes, Chen Yun noticed the sow in the pig pen. The sow was staring intently at her, making strange grunting noises. Chen Yun thought the sow was hungry, so she went to prepare pig feed in the storage room. A short while later, Chen Yun came out carrying a bucket of feed. As she approached the pig pen gate, the sow stood up. Its front hooves rested on the fence, and it stared fixedly at Chen Yun. The way it looked at her was strange. "If it weren't for the fence, I'd be afraid the sow would charge at Chen Yun." I said, "Chen Yun, this sow bites. You should wait for Grandpa to feed it." Chen Yun smiled and said, "It's fine. We've raised pigs that bite before." Chen Yun said casually. Then she opened the gate to the pig pen. Carrying the bucket of feed, she entered. Chen Yun poured the feed into the metal bowl. The sow lifted its head to look at her, its mouth still muzzled. I felt uneasy, and warned her, "Chen Yun, the sow bites. It even eats piglets." As soon as I finished speaking, the sow's gaze toward Chen Yun suddenly softened.